I like the idea of being prepared for everything, and that could mean having the ability to defend myself is a great skill to have. Having medical training, like I have first aid kits in my motorcycle and in my car with me, all the time, and that's stuff that just like the average person doesn't do. Whether that's like being in good shape, or it's knowing how to defend yourself, or knowing how to treat somebody who's been injured, or there's just so many facets of life that scout motto of be prepared comes into and affects.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 18 of the Andrew Deitch podcast. I just got back from Washington, D.C., and I cannot wait to get back to work making some more podcasts. It's about 1:42 in the morning, and obviously I'm crazy because I got to be up in about 5 hours, and I am still cranking out these podcasts. But the trip to D.C. was super fun. Had an awesome time. Shout out to all my friends that made the trip super special. Can't wait to head back up there very soon. Very fun spot to hang out. I'm going to have to take a big fat break from drinking and eating terribly, as I have taken full advantage of the happy hour at our hotel every day. And I did not care about my diet at all this past week. So time to start meal prepping and working out again for sure. Today, my guest is my friend Luke Crawford. Luke is a whole bunch of things. Depending on who you ask, he's an entrepreneur, he's a photographer, competitive shooter, world traveler, hunter, fighter, political activist. He's the state director of Students for Concealed Carry. He's a fellow Eagle Scout, and much more. And I've been friends with Luke for about 15 years or so, and we had a lot to talk about. Luke always has a way of standing out from the crowd. And since high school, he's been on the news, he's been on the radio, and he's gained a pretty big following on Instagram and Facebook due to his involvement in all the various things that I mentioned. And in this episode, we talked about some of his awesome, epic road trips, the kind of famous story of how he got on the news for one of his unique business ideas, his big recent win with Students for Concealed Carry, how he outsmarted Donald Trump's campaign and beat him to the punch on a great business idea, his activism with fighting human trafficking and the sex industry in Atlanta with Nightlight International, and we also talked about his lifting styles in the gym and his diet. And I have wanted to have Luke on my podcast since I started this thing. I mean, he's just such an interesting guy, and I really enjoyed catching up with him. So give it up for my friend, Luke Crawford. All right, Luke Crawford, we're live, sir.
Awesome, glad to hear it. glad we got to do this.
Yeah, man. So, you've done a lot of like podcasts and radio appearances and stuff like that, right? So you're pretty...
Yeah, I've done a mixture of different things. Primarily, it's been due to my political involvement.
Yeah.
And so I've done like probably 50 plus TV interviews over the years, and been on a few like radio shows, and I don't think I've ever done a podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, well, this is cool. Well, a podcast really is just kind of a radio show that
it's a radio show.
Yeah, just so happens to not be on the radio.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no point in using that name. But yeah, so that's really awesome, man. So, whoops, I'm knocking my stuff over. So, cool. I like to start off my podcast kind of giving a little bit of like context of where you grew up and stuff like that. But I mean, just to kind of give people a quick modern day Luke Crawford, I would say you're a gun activist, you're a hunter, you're a photographer, you're very politically active. What other kinds of things are you super into right now?
Those would be the kind of main things. I'm definitely very involved in politics, very involved in competitive shooting, very involved in photography, photography on the money-making side of things. I do a lot of wedding photography and photography in the firearms industry, so like product photography, that kind of thing. And then I do a lot of photography just like for fun, stuff that I enjoy, because I love photography. And so those would be kind of like the main things right there.
Nice. Cool. So kind of growing up, like I remember I've known you since we were homeschooled together, like from way back in the day.
I mean, that was probably like elementary school.
Something like that. Because I actually went to Perimeter Christian School for I started there in 4th grade. But back in the day, we were like homeschooled together. So kind of give us a quick childhood of Luke Crawford. I feel like you have a very interesting one.
So I have 3 brothers, and we all grew up here in Peachtree Corners. We moved here from Buckhead when I was 3.
And you're the oldest, right?
I'm the oldest of 3 younger brothers. We're all about 2 years apart. So the youngest one's 16. So grew up here. I was homeschooled through 8th grade, which is how I got to know you. And then went to Wesleyan for most of high school and got kicked out of Wesleyan at the beginning of my senior year of high school, and then finished at a place called Veritas, which was essentially like high school, but
you didn't go every day, right?
Yeah, so you went 2 days a week, and it was pretty awesome. You went 2 days a week, had classes, and then got homework for the rest of the week. So kind of what people are used to in college, where you you don't have class every single day.
Yeah, and you kind of like get your assignments and just like go home and do them the next day or whatever.
Exactly, and so that was how Veritas worked, and that's where I went for the rest of high school. But yeah, that's kind of a quick summary of what I did.
And then also we got to know each other really well in Boy Scouts too. Yep. That's like a huge part of...
Yeah, we both probably started Boy Scouts when we were like, would that have been in like 12, 13?
Something like that, because I think I was in like 5th grade or 6th grade.
Yeah,
and
that sounds right.
I remember like my mom wanted me to join, and I at first like didn't want to because I thought that like the Boy Scouts were so lame and like they had to wear the dumb uniform and all that kind of stuff. What were your feelings towards Boy Scouts in the beginning?
So I had actually been in a Cub Scout troop, like locally here in Peachtree Corners. I think it was 525, which was they also had a Boy Scout troop. But I was in that for a year and didn't like it. Like it was just for one, there were tons of mom leaders, and I just thought, like, Boy Scouts, why do you have mom leaders? This is Boy Scouts. But yeah, so I was never a big fan of it. And then somebody, I think it might have been like Chris Little or one of the adult leaders where we were Troop 317 invited my family to come to like a court of honor. To just kind of like see the troop and check it out and get
Which
an
is
idea.
Like an awards ceremony kind of thing for people that
exactly.
don't know.
The Court of Honor's twice a year, right?
I think so, and it's like where they give all the awards and recognition and all that kind of stuff.
Yep, exactly. And then they'll have a specific Court of Honor for you if you get your Eagle Scout, like a Court of Honor that's just focused on you. But yeah, and I came and checked it out, and I was like, ooh, this is really cool. Like this troop seems really neat, and I've always been big into the outdoors and that kind of thing. So like neither of my parents are into like hunting, or I mean they like the outdoors and hiking and stuff, but like they don't go backpacking on the weekends for fun and that kind of thing.
It's actually kind of surprising because I feel like you're so into hunting and all that stuff, and like it always has seemed like from a young age you always have been. So it's kind of interesting that you said your parents weren't really into that.
Yeah, exactly. Like growing up, they would always do outdoor stuff with us because they wanted us to get outside. But that was never like my parents' favorite thing to do was go backpacking or something like that. And even though my dad's came on plenty of Boy Scout trips and that kind of thing, but it was awesome. I mean, I loved Boy Scouts, especially in like middle school, and then I would say going into high school, it got to just be like more of I'd say I still enjoyed it. Like when I would go on a Boy Scout camping trip, I would have a blast, but there was a lot more like, oh, I'd rather go do this, rather go do that. I was playing.
And you don't want to follow the rules and all that kind of like no cell phones. And
exactly.
Yeah.
No cell phones, and I was playing sports, playing football and lacrosse like my freshman year, and I specifically remember like my freshman year of high school, I think I probably only went on like one camping trip, because we would do camping trips about once a month. I think I probably only went on like one or two my whole freshman year, because like between football and everything and so busy with other stuff. And so it definitely was like less of a priority. And then my parents' deal was always, you can't get your driver's license until you get your Eagle Scout. And
that was good motivation.
yeah. And so, I ended up getting my driver's license almost a year. Like I got it about a month before I turned 17. So I waited my whole sophomore year of high school when I could have a driver's license and didn't. And they ended up letting me, they ended up changing it to where I could get my driver's license once I completed my Eagle project.
Gotcha.
So I did,
because the process after the project can be kind of
exactly gruesome. And of course, though, I completed my Eagle project right before I turned 17, and had one merit badge left, and completed that about 3 weeks before I turned 18, and then still had my. So for those of y'all that aren't familiar with Boy Scouts, if you want to get your Eagle Scout, you have to finish it before you turn 18, and so I like snuck in right under the wire there, because I still kind of delayed and procrastinated with it, but got it done. So I'm an Eagle Scout, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And you are too, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, I've actually had a couple of Boy Scouts on the podcast so far too. My friend Davis is an Eagle Scout, and I had Trey Reed on, but he
cool.
actually, if you want to listen to that podcast, he tells about how he actually, down to the last minute, didn't end up getting it because of a whole bunch of litigation and annoying stuff that happened.
Yep, I remember hearing some of that story.
Yeah, but anyways.
Yeah, I still see Trey a bunch. I hang out with him, and he works over at Norcross Gun Club now.
Yeah, he
so
said that he sees you there sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I was thinking about too is like you've grown up in this house that we're in right now too, pretty much your whole life, right?
Yeah, since I was 3.
And this house is really cool because you're like right on the river and you've got lots of stuff. So I'm sure growing up with your brothers, like you were constantly just playing outside, and doing airsoft guns, and
we did a ton of that. And I mean, in like there was a period too of probably like elementary into middle school where we didn't even have cable. I mean, we had like.
Wow.
Well, we had like the thing where you get like 10 free channels, like
you have like the antennas or whatever.
Yeah, it was still like after antennas were a thing, but it was like whatever you could get for free plugged into the wall, because my parents just wanted us to do like other things. So I've always read a lot growing up, and still like enjoy reading a lot now. But
and you were homeschooled until 8th grade, right?
Yep.
So like your mom obviously, was she kind of doing she was like the teacher kind of.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. My mom, and she always, put a focus on things like reading and that kind of stuff. So still enjoy reading a lot to this day.
That's really cool. A lot of moms would not want to be stuck with their kids for every day for their whole
It's pretty amazing
school.
That she managed to homeschool 4 boys. That's what a lot of times when I tell people that, they're like, "What in the world?
Yeah.
4 boys? Your mom homeschooled?"
She's got some willpower.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really awesome, man. So I'm sure that your relationship with your mom is like really awesome because,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are definitely plenty of like stressful times,
of course,
and with her being the teacher, but yeah,
because she's wearing so many hats.
Yeah, exactly. But I'd say I like nowadays have a great relationship with both my parents.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I mean, I feel like a lot of people these days don't even spend so much time with their parents when they're younger and in the school age, and they get so much influence from everyone else at school, and for better or for worse, that can always have a big impact. So
exactly. And the neat thing too with homeschooling is we are just able to like do a lot of things that we never would have been able to do in like if we went to a regular school. And we did all sorts of neat. I mean, one of the coolest things about being homeschooled is you take your spring breaks and vacations whenever you want. So like we would always go at times when nothing was busy. Like I remember as a kid going to Disney World. My dad's business specifically had like a yearly meeting down there of some kind, and we would go down there in like February, and so there was like awesome. Nobody there, and then all of our friends would go in like April or whenever high school spring break is, and they'd be like, the lines were so long, so many people, everything's more expensive, so hot, and we're like, stinks that you like have to go during your spring break.
Yeah.
So a lot
cool.
of flexibility with homeschooling.
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. Yeah, because I was homeschooled until like 4th grade. So we definitely had our experience with that. But then I think my mom was just like, I think you need to go to a regular school. But,
Yeah.
But it was still a small school, still private school. But
Yeah.
But anyways, to kind of move on a little bit, but to kind of segue as well, when did you kind of get into the whole guns and hunting and all that kind of stuff? Because you said your parents weren't really into that.
Yeah, so let's see. So I got to shoot some guns through Boy Scouts. We would go to summer camp.
Was that the first time, or?
The first time I ever shot a gun, I think, was with some like family friends of ours when I was probably like 10, 11, something like that. Because I always wanted to shoot a gun, so my dad found one of his friends that did guns, and we all went to the gun range. And but I would say so I have a cousin who's about 10 years older than me. That's always like been. He's like an older cousin. But he's always been into hunting and that sort of thing. And I would say he was the one that always made me like, oh man, I want to get into hunting. And so I went deer hunting like a few times when I was younger. And then deer hunting, though, kind of got me into the world of firearms. And then when I was like 16, I got into competitive handgun shooting. And then, so I went to school at Kennesaw State. And there's a gun range probably 30 minutes from there that I became a member at and still shoot there to this day. And the owner of that gun range, his daughter is a girl or lady named Katie Botten. She was Katie Harris, but she got married not too long ago. And I actually photographed her wedding. That was pretty cool. But she was into shooting what's called 3 guns. So you shoot a rifle, a pistol, and a shotgun. And it's almost like going through an obstacle course of sorts. And that kind of thing. So she was like, you got to try this, you got to try this, you got to try this. And I was like, like that's so much stuff to buy and so many things. I'm like, just a handgun is enough for me. And finally got into it, got hooked. So I shot that like really heavily and for a few years, kind of took a break for a year. And now I'm back to, I think I'll shoot like 10 or 15 matches or so this year. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, for people who have no idea what that competitive gun shooting looks like, so you said it's kind of like an obstacle course where you're kind of like, you've got to like duck behind an obstacle and then shoot a target, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like so you're shooting on the move, and you're having to reload your guns on the move, and it's all on the clock. So you have what's called a shot timer, which is simply a stopwatch that picks up on the noise of a gunshot. So it records your last shot, and you shoot a mixture of like paper, clay, steel targets. But if it's obviously over a podcast, kind of hard to explain, but if you go on YouTube and just search for 3 Gun or 3 Gun Nation, you'll see a ton of videos and get an idea of it, and it is a absolute blast. It is a ton of fun. That's
awesome. So now to kind of just give people a perspective, how many guns do you have right now?
So I started a company about a year ago, Jawbone Media, and now I have another guy that I own that with, my buddy Brian, because he has a really like video heavy background, is an excellent videographer and photographer. So we do work for a variety of companies. So like right now I'm doing some work for Vortex Optics, Kimber Firearms, Henry, Guerrilla Ammunition, all these companies. So I have a lot of client guns at my house right now. So I mean, I probably have, I don't know, 30 plus guns right now.
Wow.
But some of those are just like client guns that are in for photo
projects. You're just literally just taking pictures of them and then sending them back.
Exactly. So it varies, but yeah, quite a few normally.
Yeah, definitely. That's, I mean, more than the average person for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, obviously we'll kind of get into the whole gun conversation later, because obviously that's a huge part of your story and just part of like the national story right now as well. You know, everyone's talking about it. But just to kind of finish up like where you are now. So you went to Kennesaw State after finishing high school.
I went to Kennesaw State for let's see. So for 3 years, and so for those 3 years I lived in Kennesaw with a guy named Chad Russell, who you know, you went to Perimeter with him.
Yeah, he just got engaged. Congrats, Chad.
Yeah, he just got engaged. And so, yeah, Chad and I lived together for 3 years. That was absolutely awesome. And then I moved, I don't remember the exact, anyway, I moved back home for my senior year because I was just taking online classes. And then I had like 3 more classes to graduate. Didn't take them, missed like registration, all that stuff. And so then Kennesaw proved to just be like too much of a hassle, and I wasn't a fan of them. And so I ended up just like re-enrolling for college classes like a couple days ago, and I'm going to finish through Thomas Edison University, which is a school up in Virginia. And because I only have like about like 9 hours of classes left.
Gotcha. So you might as well just get your degree.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm not, definitely haven't been a huge fan of college.
Yeah.
But at the same time, now I'm like, I have so little left that it's like,
You might as well just
get it done.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
When did you kind of start having that entrepreneurial vibe? Because also we kind of missed in the middle of their kind of all your little entrepreneurial ventures.
I mean, I would say it's just kind of been like there since I was pretty young. Like probably one of the things that like gets brought up the most. So that would have been my June. No, I don't know.
Talking about the golf thing?
Yeah, so that would have been.
I think it was when we were in high school. Yeah,
the summer before senior year of high school. So where Andrew and I live around here, there's a big golf course, the Atlanta Athletic Club, and the PGA Championship, one of the 4 golf majors, comes every probably like, I don't know, 6-8 years. So their parking situation is a mess, and all these people end up just like parking up the road in like a Home Depot and Target parking lots, and
then it's like a mile and a half walk.
Yeah, it's like a mile and a half walk. And so all these people are walking in the tournaments. I don't know, like July's in Georgia are ridiculously hot. So I got the idea. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go give these people rides to the tournament. But then I realized, I was like, well, I can't charge people, and this was like before the days of Uber and stuff. And I was like, I can't charge people because you have to be like a licensed taxi service and like all this kind of stuff. So I was like, I just wrote in my car, I was like, free rides, tips appreciated. And
what did it say, like PGA Taxi or something?
Yeah,
on it or
PGA
something like
Taxi. There's actually a news story that you can find. I think I have it on like my YouTube channel.
I'll make sure I link it in the video in the description of the podcast. I'll put a link down there. You can watch the video.
Yeah, it's a CBS interview, I believe, and you see a shot of my car, and so I just had and I had cold waters to give to people, and I made somewhere around like $2,000 in 4 days of doing it.
And you actually ended up, I think, hiring like Austin to like help you out too.
I ended up having a couple friends come out because there's so many people. I'm like, I can't even handle this.
Yeah.
And then
and you'd also like get their number and give them a ride back to their car too,
so
right?
I printed off little, just like not even business cards, just like a little piece of paper, printed it off and would give it to people and be like, hey, when you're ready to leave, give me a call. And I think out of all the, I didn't technically ask for money, and I think out of everybody I rode, there was only one dude who didn't give me any money. But I specifically remember there being like one guy who was like, I don't have any cash now, but he's like, I'll get you on the way back out, whatever. And I was like, yeah, whatever, like it's fine. And he gave me $100 for the ride back.
Whoa,
and then there was another
awesome.
guy who I gave, he and his son a ride like every single day for 4 days straight. And then on the last day, he showed up with like a whole bag of like, he bought me like a PGA like collared shirt, hat, belt, all this stuff. So it was pretty cool. It was
awesome.
I got to meet all sorts of interesting people and get on the news when I was, in high school, which was pretty cool, and make a bunch of money. So
was that the first time you were on the news?
Yeah, I think it was. That was
awesome.
The first legit time. I kind of remember there had been sometime my little brother and I were at like Quick Trip, and this random news reporter is like, hey, we're doing a story on like kids drinking energy drinks. Is there any way we could get like a picture of you and your brother, just like, I guess for like B-roll? They just wanted like video of us like sipping
drinking
an
a
energy
Monster
drink.
or something.
Yeah. And then I think I remember my mom being like, well, I don't want y'all to finish those or something like that. Like, I don't want y'all drinking that crap. but yeah, that was the
funny.
first time I had like a news story.
That's interesting. So, it was kind of just like you saw a need. You were like, this parking situation's terrible, and this is a crazy opportunity.
Yeah.
And it was in the summer. And did you have a job or anything, or you just kind of just...
I think I was working landscaping at that point. I worked landscaping at one point, and that was... Yeah, landscaping was my first, I guess, kind of like real job. And I love that because I love being outside.
Yeah.
And then I ended up working, because it wasn't later in that year, I started working at Dick's Sporting Goods, but that was like...
Gotcha.
Yeah, I just kind of saw a need for it. And the same thing happened just like a few years ago. Another story that comes up a lot is the Make America Great Again hats.
Yep.
So, like one day, I'm not a big Twitter person, but I get on every once in a while, and I happen to be on Twitter, and all these people... So Donald Trump, this is like 2 years before Election Day, or a year and a half probably, he's gone down to Arizona to speak at the U.S.-Mexico border about like border relations or, campaign stop. And he's wearing that classic like white Make America Great Again hat.
So it wasn't the red one yet, it was the white one?
No, it was the white one. And he was wearing this, and all these people are tweeting like, oh my gosh, where do I buy one of these? I want one of these. Where can I find one of these? And I was like, oh, I'm sure like Trump's selling them or somebody's selling them. And I start like Googling, and they're nowhere to be found. Nobody has them for sale. So I like built a website like that night and got the hats, ordered them, had them shipped to a fulfillment center in Illinois. And then the fulfillment center would actually handle like, they basically got, my big bulk box of hats, and then they would break them down into, let's say somebody ordered 2 hats, they'd grab 2 hats out of that, pack it up, and ship it to them.
So it's a totally virtual business for you.
Exactly. So the profit margins weren't all that great, but I didn't have to do like anything. Literally all I would do is check my email and respond to the occasional like customer service email, which I got some interesting, it seemed like there were a lot of really old people that wanted to buy the hats, and they would send me emails and being like, my name's so-and-so, I live in Arkansas, and I'd really like a hat. Is there any way I can mail you a personal check to get this? Or like, I had people like all this stuff. And I don't think it was like the like Craigslist scammers. I think it was just
literally
really
just old people who didn't know how to use the internet.
That didn't know how to use the internet. And they wanted their Make America Great Again hat. So that was pretty funny.
That's hilarious. And I remember you were mentioning it around that time. You were marketing on a lot of like Donald Trump Facebook groups and stuff, right? So you basically went and joined like every Donald Trump Facebook group you could find.
I literally searched Donald Trump on Facebook, and there are probably like 50 Trump groups of various things. And I joined every single one of those, and then posted like a link to my website and was like, check this out, whatever. And then I
Get your own MAGA hat.
Yeah, and then I also, another kind of way I marketed it was I started an Instagram account, and I went and DM'd all sorts of these like political, conservative focused like Instagram accounts, and or like Donald Trump support Instagram accounts, and sent him messages and was like, hey, I'll send you a free hat if you can like give me a shout out or whatever. And tons of people did. So that was kind of the way. I didn't actually like pay for any advertising.
Yeah, so that's awesome. I feel like if I was gonna do something like that, that'd be the exact way that I would go about it, because I'm all about that kind of like serial getting in the trenches, kind of like finding the people that want to buy this, rather than putting up a TV ad or making a billboard. Obviously all that kind of stuff is just so outdated, but that's crazy, man. So that was a couple years ago, kind of after you had done probably a few other kind of businesses as well, and you've kind of already started some things. But so if you don't mind sharing, how long was this project, and like what ended up happening with it?
So it lasted probably like 6-7 months. I sold a few thousand hats.
Wow.
And
by the time it was over, other people had already come in and
so the main thing that killed me is that so I got the hats made in China, which is pretty bad. I felt a little bad about that. And even like Trump was like, I got called out amongst other people. One of his speeches, he's like, there's a lot of fake Make America Great Again hats made in China, but if you buy ours, they're made in the USA. And I was like, oh,
so he eventually did started making his own.
His hats were actually never made in China. Like his actual Make America Great Again hats. But
It's fake news.
I got them. I was getting them made. The first order I ordered 500, and they sold out like that. I paid $1.87 a hat, and then I sold them for $17.76. They're normally $19.99.
That's a good price right there.
They're normally $19.99, but I put them on sale for $17.76. And so that was how I did that. And I probably only made like a $3 profit per hat. Like I think the whole, like as a whole, sold thousands of them, whatever. I think I ended up like profiting somewhere around $8,000, maybe $9,000. So not huge money, but still solid.
But for 6 or 7 months for a virtual business,
exactly,
that you never even had to touch a box of hats. That's pretty awesome.
And so the main thing that killed me was fulfillment center fees, because I was a pretty like small guy. There are these other people who like already owned their warehouses or were doing the fulfillment themselves that were just able to sell, and they were buying in such huge quantities and selling. I mean, because I think you can go on Amazon now and buy the hats for like $1 or $2, and stuff like that. You know, the cheap Chinese ones. So I did it for a while, and I was just like, there's so many people out here. I was like, I'm not going to reorder anymore.
Exactly.
Because I'm like, there's literally like thousands of people selling them. And I guess there were also a lot of people that had like significant followings already started selling them. Like there was there's some Twitter account that's some like fake redneck dude. I think it's called like Cloyd Rivers or something.
I know who you're talking about. I know exactly who you're talking about.
And he just makes a bunch of like redneck jokes and political things. So like I saw they started selling them after I'd been doing it for like a month. And you know, they already had like 500,000 followers. So they had a pretty established, and it wasn't really like, it was a product, but it was a product that was easily copied. So it's kind of like, how do you grow this?
And it wasn't even that it was easily copied. It was like you easily copied it from
It wasn't
Donald
even
Trump.
an original product. So you know, that's why I was like, like I'm not going to reorder any more of them. And so I was like, really cool. made my money, because I didn't want to order, you know. At that point, I was ordering them by the 1,000, and I was like, I don't want to get stuck with like 1,000 Donald Trump hats. Like, what am I going to do with these?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's really funny. So I remember like right around that time, wasn't that when you decided to take like you took like some big trip, right? Like a cross-country kind of trip or something?
Yeah, so there were two times that I did cross-country road trips. The first one, my buddies Vince and Jeffrey and I drove my Yukon. That was actually, we renamed it the Lucon, because my name's Luke. We drove that. We went to Colorado and back, and like saw Colorado, and that was awesome. But then the next trip, so my buddy Eric and I, Eric, shout out to him. He just finished through hiking the Appalachian Trail like 2 days ago.
No way.
Yeah, so pretty awesome.
How long did it take him? 7 months or something? No,
he did it like super fast. I think he started, I think he did it in like 4 months or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because doesn't it only take like 6 months or so?
Yeah, he did it significantly faster. And I know from hiking with him that like he kicks my butt. He's in phenomenal shape and is a fast hiker and runner. I think he's run like some marathons and stuff too. But he and his brother just like took off work and went and did it. So
he and his brother did it together?
Yeah, pretty awesome.
I feel like it's pretty rare to find someone to do the Appalachian Trail with.
Yeah, because it's such a commitment. I mean, it's a long time just to go hike.
Yeah, I actually listened to a podcast.
And you gotta like the person.
That's
like
very
a lot.
true. That's very, very true. I remember I listened to a podcast recently where this guy who had thru hiked the Appalachian Trail. Mm-hmm. It was a Joe Rogan podcast. So I can't think of the guy's name, but it was really interesting to hear all of his stories and stuff like that. Because so for people who don't know, the Appalachian Trail starts from Georgia and goes all the way up to Maine.
Yeah, and it's like 2,600 something miles.
I have no idea, but like
long.
Just think about that.
Crosses the U.S. essentially from north to south to north. Yeah.
Walking from Georgia to Maine is insane. Yeah, you remember Mr. Oaks, Merrill Oaks?
Yeah.
And he was telling me the other day he was hiking a portion of the Appalachian Trail with Mr. Arangio and a couple other guys, and he said that there was this dude that they were actually at the start point of the Appalachian Trail or the end point, however which way you want to hike it. Most people go from south to north, but some people go north to south. It's much cooler ending in Maine because you end at the top of this like epic mountain apparently.
Oh,
but
yeah.
like in Georgia, you kind of just end up like you end up at the top of this hill, but it's like not that
top of Springer Mountain.
Springer Mountain, yeah, but it's not as cool as the mountain in Maine. Anyways, but they said that they were hiking that portion of the trail, and this dude just like hits the sign, and he's like, "Well, I'm done," and they're like, "Oh, nice," and he was like this older guy. They're like, "Oh, cool. How long did you hike for?" And they just thought he did like a portion of it or whatever, and he's like, "Just did the whole thing." They're like, "Wait, what?"
That's
he's like,
awesome.
"Yep." Now I'm and they're like, "Do you need a ride or anything?" He's like, "Nope, got it figured out." Like, he just like leaves.
That's awesome.
That was the end. Well, guess I'll go home now, kind of thing. Kind of like the Forrest Gump thing.
Yeah.
Like, it just stops running and okay, guess I'm gonna go home.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. So but to kind of go back a little bit, we were talking about
road trip
and all that.
So my buddy Eric and I, we were talking and we were like, let's do a... Well, actually, I didn't even know Eric that well at this point. I'd only met him like once or twice. But I posted on Facebook, I was like, hey, I want to do a road trip out west. Does anybody want to come with me? And Eric's like, yeah, I'm game. He's like, I can go for a week. So I was like, I drive a truck now, and it gets, like 15 miles to the gallon. So I was like, I want to find something else to drive. So I started doing some research, ended up trading a gun for a 89 Geo Metro with no air conditioning. And if you don't know what a Geo Metro is, it's a pretty small car. And since this is a podcast, you don't know what I look like, but I'm 6'4", 210 pounds. So I'm a pretty big dude in this tiny little car. And it had no air conditioning, but we drove it. So we jumped in and we literally like drove this thing straight all the way to Arizona. I'm talking like switching off driving, just running the engine the whole time, and it was just fine somehow.
That's hilarious. So yeah, that was my biggest question: is why the Geo Metro? Why did you choose that?
The Geo got around 50 miles per gallon.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How many seats did it have?
So it had like your two front seats, and then so it was a 2-door, and then it had a back seat, but very small. And then we would primarily we had the back, stuffed full of all of our stuff. But yeah, and it would max out at probably like 65, 70 miles an hour with both of us in it. And it was a manual 5-speed. And
was that your first manual?
Huh?
Was that your first manual?
So that was the other thing. So we took a family trip to Hawaii, and the night before I left for Hawaii, I got this car. And I went with Eric. We drove out to like West Georgia, got it. I drove my car back. He drove that back. So we get back to my house, and I've never driven a manual before. So like that night, I go and like drive around the neighborhood some. And then like the next day in the morning, got up, drive around the neighborhood some. And I'm stalling out every like 50 feet. And then we leave for Hawaii. We get back from Hawaii on a Sunday morning. Like Sunday at like noon. I go pick him up Sunday at like 4 p.m. So I've been back. I was 2-week trip to Hawaii, home for like a couple days, or home for a couple hours. And then I go to drive to pick him up, and he lives at like 75 and 285. So for those of you not from Atlanta, I drove down onto 285, like one of the like craziest roads in Atlanta, freeway, driving this car that I've literally like never driven a manual before. And the thing with the manual, the hardest part's getting started. Once you're rolling like on the freeway, you just push down the gas.
It's just like driving any other
shift.
car.
To like shift, once you're going 50 and you want to shift from like 4th to 5th gear, it's easy. It's the like getting going in first gear that takes some getting used to. And so, I mean, I stalled that thing out probably. I remember countless times of Eric being asleep because we're exhausted and us like at a stoplight, and then me trying to take off and it like, stalling out, and Eric getting like thrown against his seatbelt and waking up and being like, oh. But yeah, on that trip, we went and did, we hiked rim to rim of the Grand Canyon. We did it overnight, so we couldn't get a permit to sleep. So we literally left like that night, hiked straight through and did it in 12 hours.
So what exactly does rim to rim mean?
So we hiked from the south rim of the Grand Canyon all the way down through the canyon, back up the other side. So it's like 24 miles.
Oh, I see.
So we hiked all the way across the Grand Canyon.
Wow.
It
Is
was
that like a
incredible.
pretty wide part of it, or
Yeah, I mean, it was 24 miles.
wow? And that includes the vertical.
Oh my gosh, yeah, very vertical. It was like miserable but awesome. We also out there, we went to Zion National Park, and we did a pretty sweet hike there called the Subway, which is like a slot canyon. So it's where like water's flowing through, and it's like 6 feet wide, 4 or 5 feet deep of water, and the walls are like 200 feet high above you.
Wow.
But we made a mistake there. Our guidebook wasn't super clear, so we ended up on this spot, and it's like 100-foot drop, and there's like a little thing. We brought rope because we knew that you had to do some rappelling, but we also didn't have harnesses, so we were like, we talked to some guy, and he's like, you can handline it all, aka like loop the rope over something, put on leather gloves, and just kind of lower yourself down. So that would have worked fine everywhere. But so we get to this spot, and we're kind of looking, it's probably like 100 feet straight down. And we're like, is this right? But there's like an anchor. So we slap our rope through, get down to the first spot, and it's like a nice little rock platform. So we pull our rope down, then there's like another anchor, go down there, nice little rock platform, pull our rope down. So now we're stuck on this rock platform. And the final like 45 feet drop though, it was about 40 feet. The final 40 feet is an undercut rock wall. So like, that's kind of hard to explain just over audio. But basically as you're coming down, it's slanted inwards.
Yeah. So if you were climbing up it, your back you'd be like climbing
upside down almost.
Exactly.
So trying to go down this on a rope that you're just holding on to means you essentially have to go down it, think like a fire pole. Like the rope's straight, there's no like putting your feet up against the wall, and it's like 40 feet. So
and you had leather gloves, you said, or no?
Yeah, we had leather gloves, but we're like, we got to go down, like we're stuck here. So I go first, and I start like lowering myself down with the gloves, and I get to where I'm probably like 10 feet off the ground, and my hands just like completely give out, because I mean my arms were just toast. So I'm like land, and it's like sandy because we're in these canyons, and I land, and Eric's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I'm like, your turn. And it literally like left burn marks on the gloves from that last 10 feet. We're just like zipped down. But then we get back, and we tell this guy that let us borrow the rope at the like local outfitter, and he's like, holy crap, y'all went down the like rock climbing side with a hand line? Y'all are nuts, dude. This is crazy.
So you went down the wrong side?
Yeah, we went down the wrong side, and then we like kind of looped around, and then we see this other side where it's just like a nice little gradual decline, and we're like, oh, that's where we were supposed to go down. So makes for a cool story.
That's funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. Did you guys go out to Joshua Tree when you were out there? I've heard
we
that
didn't.
area is really cool.
I've heard neat things though.
Yeah, I need to spend more time out in that area. I've never hiked out there, but me and my family, we did a helicopter tour of the Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah, that's
which
awesome.
was really cool. So that was the first time I'd seen the Grand Canyon, but I want to like hike
big,
around that
isn't it?
area and stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's insane.
Yeah,
and like you can't even get a real good perspective because you're so high up. And then you'll see something like you see a goat or something, like some weird animal.
Yeah, and it's so tiny.
It looks like an ant. And you're just like, holy
even from pictures,
crap.
It's not until you get there that you really realize like how massive it is.
Yeah. It's just something that you got to see for sure.
Yep.
So you guys took that trip on the Geo, and you didn't have any problems with the car?
Yeah, none at all. So then I dropped him off in Vegas, and because he had to fly home for work, so he was out there with me for a week. So then I drove from Vegas to Denver to go see some friends. I went to Denver, stayed with my old babysitter who lives out there now. Went and saw a concert at Red Rocks, which was awesome.
Oh,
and then
so
I had
cool.
a bunch of friends that were at this thing called Sojourn, kind of like a Christian discipleship retreat for the summer up in Estes Park. So I went and hung out with them for a bit. Took a bit of a trip up to Wyoming, snuck into this old abandoned missile silo. That was pretty neat.
How did you find out about the abandoned missile silo?
I just through some Googling, and I'm connected. So as far as photography goes, I love exploring abandoned buildings and stuff. So I'm pretty connected with some groups of people that are into that. They call it urbex, urban exploration.
Huh.
But
so old stuff that's just been abandoned.
Any sort of abandoned building. So
Like
I've been
dead
to
malls and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I've been into old like mental hospital here in Atlanta, and like a big popular place that's really risky to go to is out by where you were in school for a bit, right? GCSU.
Yeah.
There's
the mental
the
institution
Georgia,
or whatever it was.
mental. What is it called? But yeah, stuff like that. And so that was how I found out about that, and that was pretty cool. And
what was in the missiles silo?
It wasn't much. It was like
Didn't find any
old
missiles.
and abandoned. Yeah, no missiles, nothing too cool, but still neat to see. And then the craziest part of that whole trip is I then drove straight home by myself. So like my plan was to drive about 12 hours to somewhere around St. Louis, sleep, spend the night, just like, so the whole trip we slept in the car or camped, like Enos, hammocks, camping. So my plan, I was like, I'll find a rest stop, throw up my hammock, sleep, and then keep driving. So I get to Missouri and I found a rest stop, and it was so hot. Like it was like probably 1 a.m. and it was just so hot that I couldn't fall asleep. I was just sitting there in my hammock sweating. So I was like, and I think I had like drank so much caffeine already at that point that my body was all just like messed up. So I was like, do you know what? I'm just going to keep driving. So I drove from there all the way to Tennessee without any sleep. So at this point I've been driven like almost 24 hours straight. And then there, like I finally started to get exhausted. So I went and slept in a rest stop just like on the bench inside because they had air conditioning. Because you have to remember my car had no air conditioning.
Yeah.
So I was just like so hot and sweaty and disgusting. Finally made it to Kennesaw though after like 27 hours and went and passed out for a day or so.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was.
So this
a fun
was during
trip.
the summer, right?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So you were like, you had a break from school.
Yep.
And then you kind of mentioned that you kind of took a break from school for a while, and you went. What made you kind of decide to take the break?
I just had gotten so frustrated with it, and I've been busy with like so many other things that I'm making money, and even once I graduate, I'm like, I'm just gonna keep working for myself.
Exactly.
So I'm like, why do I want to work so hard to get this degree when once I graduate, I'm not even really going to use it. But
Yeah.
I'm so close to being done now, I'm just going to knock it out and get it finished.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that, obviously you were really involved in at Kennesaw was the whole concealed carry thing. Mm-hmm. So
Yeah,
it was a group called Students for Concealed Carry, right?
Yeah, so to tell you about that, so my freshman year at Kennesaw, I founded our chapter. So Students for Concealed Carry is a national organization, and I started KSU Students for Concealed Carry, which was our school's chapter.
And so what exactly is Students for Concealed Carry?
So it's essentially a political like activist group, similar to like all the other political groups on campus. But our whole goal is fighting for Second Amendment rights and the right to be able to carry a gun legally on a college campus. So as the current law is in Georgia, and that's going to change July 1, but as the current law is in Georgia, you're not able to carry on a college campus at all. And if you have a carry permit, you could leave your gun in the car, but that's it. And so we were frustrated with this because, for one, you'd seen these school shootings and that kind of thing. And, it didn't seem fair that just because we're college students, everybody assumes that we lack responsibility and shouldn't have the ability to defend ourselves. Because the number one argument I always heard from people was, oh, well, college students are always drunk and doing drugs and partying. Like, we don't want them to have guns. But it's like, that just made me so mad because I'm like, you're making that association assuming that that's like all any college student does. And it's like, there's so many college students that are not doing that. And there's also so many people that are not college students that are partying and doing drugs all the time that are in their 30s and 40s and 50s. So we basically worked on that for years. And then last year I became the state director for Students for Concealed Carry. So now I oversee all of Georgia. And so we've been working really hard on that, and we got a law passed this year legalizing campus carry.
Congratulations.
It was really exciting. We still have some restrictions and stuff that we'd like to get.
But that's a big victory.
Yeah, it's a huge step forward. And a lot of other states have legalized it at this point. Texas is probably one of the biggest ones, or ones that like legalized it the most recently. And I mean, we just looking at the statistics, the states that have legalized campus carry, there's been one potential active shooter stopped, and that's so far like really the only statistic we have about campus carry. But to me, like that one statistic is enough to be like, well, this is a good thing.
One time of someone stopping someone from killing a whole bunch of people is one time enough.
Exactly. And the tough thing though is you never really know, because the media obviously when somebody goes like we're around the 1 year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub shooting, the nightclub down in Orlando. And they're almost
like 49 people, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It was around 50 people that lost their lives that day. And obviously like the media is going to focus on that. And that was a place where guns were not allowed. But if that criminal had been killed before he could have killed anybody, you probably never would have heard about it on the news, which certainly would have been a good thing.
In the defense of nightclubs, though, when you're walking into a nightclub, normally they kind of give you a pat down. Mm-hmm. So at least they have some way of ensuring that there's no guns. Whereas on a college campus, when you walk in, they're not patting you down. There's just a statement saying, "Hey guys, no guns allowed here."
Yep.
All criminals are definitely going to pay attention to that.
And it's right next to the rules that say like no smoking weed and no beer allowed, and how much of that do you see?
So true.
And no cheating on tests, and that's kind of the
That's a funny argument. I haven't.
That's kind of the one thing that I've always that I've always talked about. It's like, here's the thing: criminals are by definition breaking the law. So what makes you think that they're going to suddenly follow a certain law you put in place? It's like if somebody wants to come kill a bunch of people on a college campus, they're not going to get there and be like, oh, that says the guns aren't allowed here, I guess I won't use a gun. I mean, one of the other major reasons though was robberies on campus, especially with us being here in Atlanta. I'm sure you have listeners all over the world, but we have a school, Georgia State is a college here in Atlanta that's a very like urban campus. It's in the heart of the city. And there specifically last year, I remember one that like was kind of the biggest deal. They had 2 armed robberies in their library in the same day. Like literally a dude robbed someone in the library with a gun. And
wow.
It's like, so there are all these people that are like, I want a way to be able to protect myself. And this was the first year we had bipartisan support, meaning we had Democrats and Republicans sponsoring the bill. Because that's kind of one thing. The Second Amendment has always kind of been a like conservative Republican thing, and being anti-gun has always kind of been a Democrat thing. But that's what I've kind of tried to tell people, like, this doesn't come down to being a Republican or Democrat. This really just comes down to wanting to be able to protect yourself.
Exactly. And that's actually like a really, really common thread that you're always a huge proponent of, it seems like, on Facebook. You're in the news. You've been in the news a lot. You're this concealed carry. What did you say you are now? You're the leader of the
state director. The state director. For concealed carry.
So, I think I saw like a Facebook post you made a while ago that said something kind of like, everything eventually boils down to violence or something like that. Yeah. And like violence is the final answer kind of thing. And
yeah, that was a fascinating thing I was thinking about. It was specifically in reference to like taxes and laws and that sort of thing. Because the way I like to look at any new law that our government is proposing is this law worth killing someone over? Because people don't like to think of laws that way, but that's really the truth of the matter. Like, so let's say, let's take like a simple law like requiring you to wear your seatbelt. That's a law that everybody agrees it's a good idea. You need to wear your seatbelt. But here's the thing: if you get a seatbelt ticket and then don't pay it, then you go to jail. And if you resist going to jail, then you're going to get killed. And that's how all laws work. They all are backed up by violence. And so I try to take a look at any new laws we're putting in place, like, is this law really worth backing up by violence? Like, if somebody chooses to completely ignore this law, is it something we're willing to have our, police kill somebody over? So that's kind of how
that's powerful, man, because a lot of people don't think about it that way.
Exactly.
They just think, well, you should pay it. You should pay the thing. Oh, well, if you weren't being a stupid head and resisting the police, then what? But it's like, at the end of the day, it's governmental paternalism. Why is the government telling me what I should and shouldn't do with my seatbelt?
Yeah, and I mean the like the seatbelt thing, I honestly don't really have a problem with it being a law because I think people should wear their seatbelts. But as more laws are proposed, it's like this is just more government interference in our lives. Do we really want this?
Exactly, and it's like if you're dumb enough to not wear the seatbelt, like why is my money as a taxpayer going towards enforcing someone else to wear a seatbelt that's not smart enough to do so already?
Yep, exactly. You could just let natural selection run its course.
Exactly, and that's an interesting concept. Like, there's a lot of things that could fall under that category. For example, the criminalization of lots of hardcore drugs.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I made a I shared a Facebook video recently that was talking about how I think it was in Portugal they decriminalized heroin, and instead of putting these people in prisons when they were caught with it, they were sent to some sort of rehabilitation program, something like that. And they also opened up like free clinics where addicts could go and come try to get help and get clean. And their numbers of reported deaths of heroin overdosage had like drastically dropped.
Yeah, that's something that's been interesting to me because it's definitely a hard thing for me to get behind, and I would say as of right now I definitely don't support the decriminalization of hard drugs, and that's primarily because my my uncle and somebody I was really close to struggled with a cocaine addiction for like 20 plus years and then ended up killing himself, and he was married with kids, and just like super sad story, and seeing all the damage and like hurt and pain that caused, on like my family and his parents and all that. It's just like...
It's a hard thing to support.
Yeah, it's a hard thing for me to be like...
Yeah.
Because on one hand, I'm like, if you want to go do drugs and be an idiot, like, whatever, do it. Like, that's on you. But then at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to see, like, even if you're a random person, I don't want you or your family to have to, like, go through what I've seen there.
Yeah.
So... And
my stance on it would be not necessarily deregulation, but decriminalization, meaning like if you're caught, let's say you're caught, like your uncle, if he was caught with cocaine, he wouldn't necessarily be put in jail, but there would be
I think that we need to treat things differently, because I mean I think it's ridiculous that I have a lot of conversations with a friend of mine that works with the Atlanta Police Department, and he talks about like how just not too long ago he was at a gas station and there's a car on, and he goes up, guy's slumped over the steering wheel, and he wakes the dude up. He's like, hey, you okay? And dude had a heroin needle sitting in his lap. He was down he had come into Atlanta to get heroin and obviously gotten high like in the car and then passed out. But my buddy called an ambulance for him and got him, sent to the hospital because he was like overdosing. And he's like, I just took the heroin and like flushed it down the toilet, threw it away in our little drug destroyer machine thing or whatever. Yeah. He's like, I'm not gonna. He's like, me arresting that guy is like not really gonna do anything, Like he's gonna go spend a few nights in jail, bail out, pay a big fine, because he was a like corporate dude from the North Atlanta area, like. It's really not going to benefit him. All it's going to do is cost taxpayer dollars and not really help anybody.
Exactly.
So the way we're like attacking these issues, it definitely I think needs to be like, we need to take a look at it, because I think treatment is more so the answer than just throwing people in prison.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I feel like can be it's always seemed like a liberal thing to be like, yeah, let's legalize weed, and like the conservatives are like, we've got guys like Jeff Sessions that are saying like weed is simply just as dangerous as heroin, which is just just one of the most idiotic statements like you could make. But it is interesting how I think that there's a large bipartisan movement to kind of go towards this, but it seems like the people that are actually in places of power don't have the same sentiments. So I think over time we're going to have
I feel
hopefully some sort of reform with this.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't think completely like deregulating it is a good idea.
No.
but taking a hard look at how we're treating people that are getting, arrested and busted for these kind of things.
Exactly.
And, instead of saying, okay, we're going to lock you up in jail for 2 years, and now you get out and have a record and, all that kind of stuff.
And not only that, you get out and you're probably just, where are you going to turn? You're probably going to go straight back to the drugs because that's the place of comfort and that's where you know.
Exactly.
And I talked about this a lot on my podcast with my friend Davis. He struggled with some addiction and stuff and went to rehab and whatever. So if you're interested in that kind of conversation, if you're listening to this, go listen to that episode because that's actually really interesting. Kind of hear it firsthand from somebody who's gone through all that. But to kind of move on from like the drug subject and stuff, but to kind of go back to the political stuff, you're super involved in like, you're really active in politics and stuff. Not necessarily, not active in politics as in you're serving in a political role, but, you have lots of really strong opinions. You're part of this concealed carry thing, so you're doing kind of like lobbying kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
So what kind of like got you interested in that area of politics?
Back in like late middle school, there was this homeschool program. It was a thing called Teen Pact. And essentially what you did is you went down to your local state capitol, and for 4 days, you just kind of learned about like the legislative process, how it worked, like what a bill was, how a bill was passed, how a bill was written, and just kind of learned all about the legislative process. And I just found that fascinating. So I've always been like really interested in politics, like all through high school and that sort of thing. And then being involved in like competitive shooting and that kind of thing, it was just natural that like, hey, the Second Amendment politics just called to fall in place here. And so that's but at the same time, like I've been involved in political campaigns and all sorts of different things. So there's a lot of like political avenues. And that's what, I'd say increases in freedom are something that I always see myself like fighting for, because a lot of people have asked me like, hey, now that campus carry's passed, what are you going to do? We still have some restrictions and stuff I want to get rid of, so I'm going to keep working on this. But I could definitely see myself getting involved in some sort of role to work against trafficking of women and that sort of thing. I was a volunteer leader with an organization called Nightlight International, which our Atlanta group has now merged with the Dream Center, which is a organization that does all sorts of awesome stuff here in Atlanta. But we did all sorts of like outreach and basically offered programs to help men and women that were involved in like the sex industry and trafficking and that kind of thing. And so I did that for 2 to 3 years, something like that. I'd have to look at the exact
That's really
dates.
awesome. So for people that are listening that are kind of uneducated on that subject, basically Atlanta is like the largest hub for human sex trafficking, right?
It's a huge issue here in Atlanta, which a lot of that just comes from us, being a big like central area for the Southeast. We're also one of the biggest drug pipelines in the world, because a lot of drugs come up like via Miami through Atlanta and via Texas through Atlanta to then spread all over the East Coast. So, we're a major pipeline for like all things, so it only makes sense that would follow.
Yeah, so for people that, are in this and they've gotten entrapped in this sex industry, how do people typically get taken, or how do people typically get into this whole
it varies
mess?
tremendously. You see everything from like parents that have been involved in it to where their kids just naturally get involved in it at a young age. You see a lot of it comes from like drug addictions. People, like just finding different ways that they
so they're kind of just selling themselves for money, and then they ended up getting kind of trapped in it. And
then a lot of it comes from, I would say, there's like more of the trafficking that you hear about is like basically women that start talking to guys that are, they're from other states or whatever, and kind of get convinced that this guy's like, so in love with them. And then they, move down here and are now stuck and trapped in all of this.
Wow. So like some guy on the internet is trying to like convince them.
But he's
basically
probably
kind of
trying to convince 15 different girls at the same time.
He's kind of like catfishing them into coming down here, and then he starts pimping them out or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that I'd say generally that involves drugs and all sorts of like sexual abuse, rape, physical abuse. Pretty much everybody we see in that industry, from people that are working at we always say it's like 99.99%. It's not 100% because there's some people out there, but people that are working in strip clubs, people that are working in the world of porn, and people that are working as prostitutes all have a incredibly high rate of sexual and physical assault, like numbers that just blow anything else out of the water. And the life expectancy numbers of people working in the sex industry as a whole are tremendously lower than anywhere else.
That's interesting. So I definitely want to talk about that for a second, but what does the organization that you were working with, what do they actually do to actively rescue people from those situations and get them back on?
Yeah, so they do kind of a mixture of different things. They do like an outreach program where we would actually go out to like areas in Atlanta that had these kind of issues going on, like late at nights generally. We would generally go, 1, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. on the weekends to places that are like known problem areas, is kind of like an outreach option just to build relationships and get to know these people. And then there's also a 24/7 hotline, which, people could call at any time and somebody could come pick them up. And then they have what's essentially like a rehabilitation facility with inpatient and outpatient options to help these people. Because one of the tough things, talking about the way the legal system works and stuff like that, is, a lot of these people have been arrested a few times, and now it's like every time they get out of jail, it's like, well, I have a prior, I have a record now, so how am I going to go get a job? And so
I know how to make money selling my body or whatever.
Exactly. So they fall back into that. So that's been kind of one of the big things, is helping people get into more stable work positions and that kind of thing.
That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. So for people that are working in a strip club or something, you would typically think, oh, that person's just an employee and they're just taking their clothes off on stage for money. Mm-hmm. But how are they getting entrapped into a system where they're not able to get out, and they would, you'd consider them like sex slavery or whatever?
Yeah, there's just so much of it that is like dark. It's just a dark, seedy world. If you go back and just look at news reports and legal proceedings here in Atlanta, almost every single strip club in Atlanta has had, whether it be like stories of management raping people that work there, or stories of, people dying of drug overdoses working there, stories of physical assault by like employees on another employee. And there's just like the crime just like surrounds all that. But I think there's people that get kind of like talked into doing something, and then they the money keeps them there, or there's there's just so many different ways that people get pulled into it. But I think drugs is probably one of the bigger ones. But yeah, it all just comes down to like to me, they're all in a similar, they're all to me the sex industry, like prostitution, pornography, strip clubs. They're all the sex industry and very similar, because they're all basically, you're exchanging money for a person's body. For a sexual favor, whether it's a video or whether it's like right there in real life. Like, it's all the kind of the same thing to me. And I just don't think that's right. Like, I think people are worth more than that and more valuable than that. And so that's something I've definitely been very passionate about over the years.
It's interesting because I've heard the point kind of brought up, like, for example, Joe Rogan has kind of talked about this a couple times on his podcast, where he says it's interesting how you can go to a massage parlor, like an actual massage parlor, not these seedy ones that, you're trying to get a happy ending or whatever. But you can pay someone to touch your body and it feels good. But prostitution, it's sex, so it's a lot different. But from a purely physical, take all the, I guess, cultural implications out of it from a purely physical standpoint. It's someone that's touching your body in a way that makes you feel good. So why is one legal but not the other kind of thing? It's always, I think that's an interesting point of view, but I think there's just more to it to break it down too simplistically like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that when you get into the like sexual nature of things, it's just such a big difference because, I mean, I can't tell you like how many times I've had a friend that's like given me a back massage that's a friend, and that's it, you know? Like, so I think it kind of like takes things to a whole different level. And
I think taking away like our puritanical and religious background as a country, it's really hard to separate all that out into just a purely physical standpoint. Like it's, because on one hand you could say, if you don't believe in any of that, you could say, well, sex is simply just physical touch, and it's no different than your friend giving you a back massage, but it is different.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from.
But just to kind of play devil's advocate here, a lot of people would argue that if prostitution was legal, because it's an illegal activity, if it was legal and we regulated it rather than just writing the whole thing off, because the weird thing is we've regulated porn, right? You can have sex on camera for money, but you can't have sex behind closed doors for money.
Kind of nuts to me.
Which seems very silly.
Yeah, the whole way, I mean, I look at that is like, because a lot of people argue like, oh, let's just legalize it and regulate it. For one, like that's just another way, more regulations, more government interference, that kind of thing. But for one, I don't think legalization is almost like we were talking about drugs earlier. I don't think it's really going to help the problem, but I do think that we need to look at the treatment options for so especially in the city of Atlanta, they've gotten a lot better at looking at a lot of these women that are involved here as the victims, not as the criminals.
That's good.
Because, I mean, there are countless stories of girls that had been kind of like pressured into prostitution at the age of 13, and they're getting by the time they're 18, they've already been arrested twice for prostitution. Now they're an 18-year-old with 2 priors on their record. And it's like their opportunities, it's like, what do you do at that point?
Yeah.
And so that's one thing the city of Atlanta has gotten a lot better at, and that I would like to see us keep making progress is just how we're helping these people, and how we're working to help these people get out of it, and realizing that, hey, this person is a victim, not a criminal.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So to kind of shift gears a little bit, I know we were talking kind of about photography earlier. This is like a huge shift in the conversation, but I actually remember it was interesting because before I asked you to be on the podcast, I was kind of thinking about what we were talking about, photography. And I actually remember back in the day when we were in Boy Scouts, you were actually kind of into photography then. And I remember on one specific camp out, me and you went on like a little side hike, and we took some pictures and stuff. And I had never really thought of photography that way. I always just kind of thought, oh, cool, this guy has a really expensive camera and he can kind of frame a picture nicely. But I hadn't thought about like actually the skill of photography and getting good at it and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of interesting because I remember you were actually one of the first ones where I remembered, oh, wow, Luke actually is trying to get good at this.
Yeah, I always enjoyed photography. Like, I always thought it was cool. But then that's what a few years ago I was shooting competitively, and I mean there was one year where I probably spent like almost 100 nights in hotel rooms traveling to shooting competitions, and
wow.
I was practicing about 2 days a week plus like some practice at home.
Is it just for fun, or were you like doing it professionally at all? Or
I mean, I was making money, had sponsors, but like I was coming close to breaking even.
So it was just more for fun, but
yeah, more for fun,
but it wasn't
very
eating a hole in your pocket.
Yeah, and I mean, there's very, very few people that are like actually making a living in that world. So I was like, I need to get into some other like hobby. I'm getting sick of this. Like, I'm gonna get burnt out of shooting if I don't pick something up. So I was like, I'll get back into photography, and just started taking got into doing a lot of like skyline, like cityscape pictures around Atlanta. Started sneaking onto some rooftops, and ended up, I've probably been on like 50 or 60 rooftops around Atlanta, and that kind of is what got me into photography. And then I got into the world of wedding photography.
Just because it's the most lucrative, or?
Yeah, it was a mixture of that, and I had a friend that just was like, you need to try it, and when I got into it, I was like, it's just a ton of fun. I love it. Like, it's really neat.
Did you like go with a friend to like another wedding shoot to kind of get a feel for it?
Yeah,
or?
so I shot quite a few weddings as like a second shooter to kind of learn how things work. And
makes sense.
That's what I get a lot of people that ask me. They're like, I want to be a wedding photographer. How do I do it? And that's what I recommend to people. I'm like, go be a second shooter or an assistant for somebody. Do it for free, and get out there and put some time in and practice, because honestly the amount of just like straight garbage photographers I see is insane. It seems like every couple weeks I see somebody else that I know that's suddenly like, I'm a photographer, book me, and I'm like, you got a camera 3 months ago and don't have a clue what you're doing.
That is funny how many poser quote unquote photographers, because there's so little. I mean,
you got to start somewhere, and like,
exactly.
I'm fine with it, but at the same time, it's like I would hate for somebody to book one of these people to shoot their wedding, and then have these. I just hear so many stories of people that get a terrible photographer for their wedding, and then they're
that
like,
sucks.
"Oh gosh, this
and
is awful."
Obviously, wedding photography is a whole another animal than shooting skylines and stuff like that.
Yeah, wedding photography is pretty nuts. I've shot like 20, 30 weddings now, and it's pretty stressful. Everything's got to move at a really fast pace, and the main thing is you have to be comfortable in like any and all lighting environments. Like if we came down into this room right now and this is where we are going to be doing like bride and groom portraits, or if this is where people are going to be getting ready, like I would have no problem figuring out photography. And that's where like I've seen a lot of people who post like a few pictures on Instagram from a wedding that look great. It's like the posed couple shots outside just where they want them. But then I'm like, let me see the whole gallery. Like, how do your makeup shots get? How do your reception shots look? How do your first dance shots look? And so that's something that it takes a lot of work to kind of learn to be ready for like all situations.
For sure.
Because weddings, I mean, you encounter everything from like product photography to portraits to candids to like photojournalism type stuff. It's kind of a mixture of everything.
And a lot of people now kind of want like videos for their weddings too. So a lot of like now people want like a drone at their wedding and stuff like that.
It gets pretty wild. The video is definitely becoming a more popular thing.
Is for the drone thing, does the drone get distracting for weddings? I feel like people would constantly be looking up and like the sound of it would be annoying.
Generally the times when we've used a drone in like video projects, it's just been like the bride walking down the aisle is a pretty cool time to do it, or
that is cool.
The exit when the bride and groom are leaving. But I haven't seen people that fly drones for like the whole ceremony, because it would get to be a huge pain.
Yeah,
they're loud. They
definitely are.
Yeah, for those who haven't heard a drone, like the first time I ever heard one take off, I was like, oh dang, that thing makes a lot of noise.
Yeah, for sure. And like when one's flying overhead, but if it's high enough, you can't hear it. But I mean, if you're getting wedding shots and you're actually going to see anything
you're definitely
going
to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. Do you so that's kind of how you got into photography and stuff, and now you do weddings, and now you do product shoots for guns and like all kinds of stuff. That's really awesome. What just kind of for practical stuff, what would you recommend for people? Like you said, you gave some advice if people are trying to get into wedding photography, but as far as equipment, I think a lot of people get really hung up on the equipment, and they think, oh, I've got to get the highest quality thing, and they've got to get the best quality this, and blah, 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 blah. What are your kind of opinions on that?
Yeah, I mean, for somebody who's just like, I want to be a photographer, I want to get into photography, I would tell them to go out and buy just like a basic crop sensor DSLR, or even a lot of the mirrorless cameras out there are really great these days.
For people who kind of don't know the difference, what's the difference between DSLR and mirrorless? Because I know that gets thrown around a lot.
A DSLR is where you have an actual like mirror in the camera that flips up and down, and there's an actual like shutter that moves, like think like a garage door that opens and closes.
Captures the image.
Yep. Whereas a mirrorless camera, it's all digital. So like a mirrorless camera is like your cell phone, but the difference in like a high quality mirrorless camera is that the sensor is way bigger than what's in your cell phone. So I recommend don't worry too much about what camera you get, and then I recommend everybody starting with just one fixed focal length lens. something like a 50 millimeter. So the focal length is the millimeters. So like a 200 millimeter is a pretty big zoom lens, and a 14 millimeter is like a really, really wide lens. So a 50 gives you a lot of good options for like everything. But the main thing I recommend, I mean, no matter what gear you have, is just to get out and practice. Like I've completely taught myself photography just by spending a lot of time trying things out, taking pictures.
And the other thing that's interesting about photography is that it's all objective. Like there's no way to say this is the perfect photograph, or this is, it's artistic. So you've got to teach yourself kind of in a lot of ways. There's not really, you can take a bunch of photography classes where they can teach you a lot of tricks. Yeah, but you still got to kind of build your style and have an artistic eye. And I mean, there's still like, if your shot's blurry or out of focus, like you might try to pass that off as artistic, but like generally we can tell when it was just like because you suck. But but there's there's definitely a whole like artistic thing behind it, that being able to just figure out the settings doesn't really make you a photographer. Yeah. And so right now in today's day and age, if you're going to be a photographer, you pretty much have to be on Instagram. Yeah. Pretty much have to be. If you're going to be, if you're getting discovered, if you're trying to market yourself, that's kind of like a good showcase. And I saw a funny post on your Facebook the other day that said like the most diverse Instagram page in Atlanta or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was because you took a screenshot of your Instagram page and it had like a wedding picture, then it had like a modeling picture, then it had a picture of guns, and it had like a picture of your dog, and
and like me working out and all sorts of stuff. That was something. So like I got into Instagram a while ago, and then I had for a while, like all I posted on Instagram was just like rooftop cityscape pictures. So I gathered a pretty like niche following in that world. And then I was just like, I just got kind of bored of, like, I'd been on so many rooftops, I got kind of tired of that. And I was
You're shooting the same city skyline.
Yeah, I'm like, well, I want to keep posting on Instagram. And then I was like, well, I'm like just going to specifically post like, stuff that like everybody will kind of like or whatever. And then I was like, I'm not really making any money off Instagram. I'm not like, whatever. I'm like, I'm just going to post whatever I want. And so I have a mixture of, I'm sure I have people that were following me for my wedding stuff that unfollowed me when they saw guns. And I'm sure I had gun people that unfollowed me when they saw weddings. And that's cool with me because, while you talked about like Instagram being a necessity for photographers, like it's definitely beneficial and helpful. But the one I'm actually I also run a blog with my buddy Aaron called the Victory Gun Blog. So it's a blog focused in the firearms industry. I think I'm going to write an article on there though, kind of talking about how likes and followers don't equal money. Because
totally.
I see a ton of it with photographers that are all about like, I want to try to, like, I got to get more followers, got to get more likes. But the truth is, like, I know a lot of very talented photographers that are making a lot of money and doing it as a living, and they never use Instagram or Facebook or social media, because a lot more of it, especially in the commercial side of things, like what I do in the firearms industry, comes down to who you know and your connections
and who's willing to actually pay you to do your work. That's another thing with photographers is people are always trying to get free shoots.
Yep, absolutely.
People are always trying to, hey, you have a really nice camera. Do you mind coming out and taking some pictures of my car? Or...
And there's certain people that like I'll go take free pictures of because they're awesome and like I enjoy it. So you just had Elizabeth Ward on your podcast. I was about to mention that. Yeah, we've shot together a few times.
But she's like interesting subject matter that you're actually wanting to photograph.
Like it's great because she's beautiful and she's like super talented. For those of y'all who haven't listened, she's like a professional ballerina dancer. And so that kind of stuff, like that's a ton of fun for me. Like I do that as like, oh, I have too much work going on. Like let me go do something just like fun like this.
Exactly.
And so like that's an absolute blast because like for one, she's just a cool person, but also like she's talented and I'm always amazed by her like abilities as a dancer. So there's some stuff that like I do for free like that because I enjoy it and it's a lot of fun.
That's more like the hobby side. I was more meaning towards people that are trying to get you.
I mean, I get people that want people ask all the time for just all sorts of stupid stuff like that, trying to get free photography.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing also that I was going to mention is you're talking about on your Instagram how you have like some fitness posts and stuff, and you also talked about how you were in football when you were in high school. Is that kind of where you got started in fitness, or how did...
No, so I played sports in high school, and then I went and went off to college, went like 2.5 years of probably working out like once or twice. I was around like 220.
Once or twice ever in the 2 years?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I was thinking at first you were like once or twice a week, and then that was the end of the statement.
once or twice. Like, I never worked out. And I mean, I was like 225, and like if I flexed, like my arm was just flat. Like, I was in terrible shape. And then one day I was just like, dang, I want to get in better shape. So I did, and started working out all the time, and now I'm like I've been cutting some weight down for this summer, and I'm like around 205 right now.
Nice.
And in a whole lot better shape. I'm strong. I'm squatting over 400 pounds, deadlifting almost 500 pounds.
Dang.
And,
what's your deadlift at right now?
495.
Dang, so you're really close.
Yeah,
that's awesome,
really
man.
close. I haven't tried to max in a while, because the past 2.5 months of me like cutting down some, I've been focused on more of like a bodybuilder approach to weightlifting. So a lot of like really high rep stuff. I feel like a lot of people get scared of the high reps, and they say like, oh, that's too much volume. If you're not on steroids, it's going to hurt you, or it's not going to work. But like, I had just a couple weeks ago, I started my work off with it was 8 sets of 8 of goblet squat.
Kettlebells, or we're using
dumbbell, but
nice.
8 sets of 8 of that, supersetted with 8 sets of 8 of back squat, and so just like a ton of volume.
So superset, for people who don't know,
yeah, it's where you do your first 8 you do 8 goblet squats, then 8 back squats, then 8 goblet squats, then 8 back squats. You're mixing
with like
them.
no rest really in between. Yeah,
exactly. And so yeah, I've been hitting like a bunch of really high volume stuff these past couple months, and
that's awesome.
I've been liking it. And because back like probably November through January, I was doing Jim Windler's 5-3-1 program.
Oh, nice. I actually was doing that for the past year or so, too.
Yeah, I really like it. It's a very, like, powerlifting focused program.
Totally. I was doing, like, a hybrid program where I was doing the 5-3-1, but I was also doing some, like, accessory stuff, too.
Yeah, I was still doing some accessory work, but I really like that program. I think it's an awesome... That and Starting Strength, which is Mark Ripeto's thing, I think are two of the best that, like, I encourage people to... because I've had a lot of people ask me, they're like, I'm interested in like working out again, and especially I unfortunately see it a lot more with women that like they just go and run on a treadmill for 45 minutes, and then they're like, oh, I'm not making any progress, but just a whole bunch of like steady state cardio isn't going to help you out that much. But
exactly,
go lift some weights. Everybody benefits from it.
Exactly, that's very true. One misconception that I talked about, I think, with my podcast with Ashlyn Showalter. You know her, right?
I remember her. She was she went to PCS, right?
She didn't go to PCS, but she went to Perimeter. She was like in Gold Rush and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But anyways, one thing we talked about was it makes me laugh, and it's also kind of hilariously offensive in the way that women think that if they go lift weights, they're just going to become super buff all of a sudden. Yeah,
which is not true.
And it's offensive in the fact that it's like, do you understand how much time and effort it takes for a guy to get that jacked?
Yeah, exactly.
Let alone, you think you're just after like a day of doing some bicep curls that you're all of a sudden going to be this monstrous, jacked human being? That's literally kind of offensive, because that's kind of saying that I'm not even at the level of those female bodybuilders a lot of times, and... You know,
and there's no female is going to end up looking like those scary female bodybuilders unless you start like injecting testosterone into yourself.
Exactly. That's another interesting thing about today's athletic world and the whole like transgender thing. I think you posted something about that the other day that was like,
yeah, it's nuts. Some dude just went and won. Well, a dude that is now a woman just won a female track meet, and he like crushed the competition. Like it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I actually was curious. I was like, I want to go compete in the Olympics. So I was like, what sport could I do? So I was like, weightlifting, because I'm a guy, so obviously I'm going to be stronger. But I forgot about the Chinese and the Russians. They have some rather large women that I would be competing up against. And there's a Chinese lady that is snatching like 400 pounds, like insane.
What?
And it's women doing this, which I'm sure they're on all sorts of drugs. Like the Russian lady I looked at had been like busted for steroids twice, but she can deadlift like 650 pounds. And I'm like, guess I can't compete up against them.
Yeah, for real. The crazy thing about steroids for women too is there's actually permanent effects, like permanent positive effects as far as strength goes. So it's like, oh yeah, I got busted a few years ago, but it's like you've actually altered your genetics in a way that it's unfair to compete against clean athletes. That's the one thing I've always
heard is with steroids is even like let's say you were to get on steroids for 6 months or a year or whatever, you're still going to have some lasting effects 5 years ago, and those lasting effects could be that you have more muscle. They could also be that you're sterile and like can't have kids now, but
that's a side effect, a minor side effect. There's I'm a big believer in transparency and trying to be as open and honest as possible. And my thing is like, dude, if you want to do steroids, more power to you. Like if you want to do that to your body.
The thing that cracks me up though is the people that are not natty, and then they're like, oh no, I am, and I'm like, dude, you're like 6'1", 260 and shredded. Like that, you can't, like, that doesn't happen naturally.
And like they'll get to that point in like a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, okay, obviously you are not natty because it's not humanly possible to put on that amount of volume and stay shredded too.
And I mean, it's crazy to see just the progression in drugs over the years, because you look back at like Arnold has always been like somebody that I think's awesome. I've read all his books, like just a cool dude. But he admits that like he took some steroids at some point, but he still competed at like, I think he was like around 200 something pounds, 220 maybe. But now you see like people are competing at like 260, 280, 300. I mean, it's just insane how much muscle people are packing onto their frames. And I mean, it's interesting because it's people that want to push the limits of what a human body can do, but it's also like, I mean, it's kind of dangerous. I mean, it seems to be like pretty, at least once a year you hear of one of these pro bodybuilders dies of like a heart attack or something. And then I was just listening not too long ago, Ronnie Coleman was a very famous bodybuilder. He won Mr. Olympia like 4 or 5 times, and that's, for those of y'all that don't know, it's like the biggest bodybuilding competition a couple years back. But he's had like tons of back surgeries and like all sorts of stuff. I mean, when you push your body to those levels, it's just not healthy. It's not good for it. And but the steroids is a whole sort of interesting thing because too, we talked about like wanting transparency there, but then they're illegal. So that's where it's the whole thing, like, should they really be illegal? Should people be able to do them if they want to?
Yeah, it's like the whole governmental finger wag, like, hey, I shouldn't be doing that, but it's like, if you really want to do it, man, like, whatever. It's like jumping off a cliff. You shouldn't do it, but it's not illegal.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I think with steroids that would, like, while I'm not out, like, fighting for them to be legalized, the one thing that, like all drugs, is if they are, like, controlled, then let's say a doctor is prescribing them to you, at least you know what you're actually like putting in your body. You don't know, like, I mean, I heard on the news a few days ago a whole bunch of like 3 or 4 kids in South Georgia died, high school students, from like 3 or 4 separate places, but all connected to one drug dealer that was selling what was it? I think it was knockoff. It was some sort of pill. But it turned out whatever he was selling was completely different, and the dosing was all wrong. And so they, like, I think like 2 or 3 kids died of overdoses and like 5 or 6 more in the hospital.
Wow.
Because I mean, when this stuff's on the black market, like you don't have a clue what's actually in there.
Very true.
Which seems to be the same thing with like nutritional supplements these days.
Definitely. There's a lot of shady stuff, and like even at like GNC,
food in general.
Yeah.
I know you talked about that. I think with Elizabeth. We took pictures not too long ago when we were talking about that. Some like it's just nuts. Food in general. Like my diet now pretty much. I'm doing like a kind of a mixture of things. So it's the warrior diet is what it's called. So I generally eat just 1 to 2 meals a day. But even if I eat 2 meals a day, it's within like a 3 or 4 hour period. So just in the evening. So
it's kind of the whole intermittent fasting kind of deal. Yeah,
exactly. And I was kind of skeptical of it for a while, but all my life I've never really eaten breakfast, which is like counterintuitive because for years I've always been told like you got to eat breakfast. It's the most important meal of the day. You got to eat breakfast. And I've just like never been much of a breakfast eater. Like when I wake up in the morning, I don't want to go eat. Like I'm just not hungry yet. And so I already for a long time wasn't eating till like 12, 1 p.m., 2 p.m., stuff like that. So I started doing that, and then
what time do you eat right now? So if you're eating like 1 or 2 meals,
generally I wait and eat till 4 or 5 o'clock. But I also I've kind of learned in doing that the difference between mental hunger and physical hunger, and so a lot of it is just like willpower. So like I was at the pool just a few days ago, and there are people cooking burgers at like noon, and I was like, oh man, those smell good. I'm kind of hungry. And I was like, I'm really not that hungry. I just sounds it's the
good.
Same idea if while we're sitting here doing this podcast, if we had a big old tub of popcorn, you'd eat the whole thing while you're watching a movie. But if you have like a little cup of popcorn, you'll probably eat that and be satisfied.
Very true.
And but I would say as far as the diet goes, I had I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and back when I trained in Kennesaw, I remember talking to my coach up there at this place, Iron Clutch Fitness, and I was like, what do you recommend for dieting and stuff? He's like, it's really pretty simple. He's like, I would write a diet book someday, and it's going to be like 500 pages long, and every single page is just going to say, don't eat shit. Because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, there's so many like fad diets and all these different things. So I've experimented with like paleo and ketogenic and all this kind of stuff. And what I've found is like I consistently stay healthy as long as I just don't eat like garbage.
Exactly.
Because I did the paleo. Yeah, I did the paleo thing for a while, but like I love cheese and milk, and I don't think that cheese and milk are like terrible for you. And with the ketogenic thing, it's really low carbs, and I'd say I still stay pretty low carb wise, but I also don't think that like
carbs are evil.
Yeah,
like, I'm with you.
And as long as they're healthy carbs, I mean, I'm not talking go eat a bag of potato chips, but stuff like potatoes and certain rice and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally.
They can be just fine for you, and even bread.
Oats.
I eat bread. Yeah, oats. Oatmeal, like
nuts have some carbs.
Yeah, exactly. And it really just comes down to like I try to eat just I guess what people call like whole foods stuff. The less ingredients, the better. So
exactly. That's one thing that I'm kind of phasing out right now. I was doing the ketogenic diet for the past couple months.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to phase out. Number one, just because I knew it wasn't going to be a long-term thing for me anyways. Kind of just wanted to try it, but also it was just getting less practical for me. And like you said, I do enjoy eating some carbs and stuff. So, but I definitely have gained a lot of knowledge from doing that. Like as far as what I enjoy and just kind of switching up my diet. But I agree. I kind of, right now I'm in the same place where I just want to eat good, clean, whole foods that the least quote unquote processing, the better. And the less amount of ingredients, the better. When you look at a label, if you're looking at a can of beans, I'm trying to see water, beans, and sea salt. That's it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not trying to see a whole bunch of
preservatives.
Exactly. If the list of ingredients is longer than a few lines and half the things you don't know what they are, you probably shouldn't be eating it.
Yeah, but I also would encourage people to do I think it's great to subscribe to a specific diet for a while, more so for like the mental toughness aspect, because for somebody who's been eating a lot of like garbage all the time, So, like, I mean, when I was in school those first 3 years, I mean, I ate fast food all the time, just ate, like, junk food. I remember my freshman year, my buddy Chad, who I talked about, we lived in the dorm, so we didn't have a kitchen. We had, like, a mini fridge and a microwave. And we would eat, like, we had, like, Hot Pockets and corn dogs that we would eat all the time, just, like, straight garbage. But if I'd, like, one of those days just been like, all right, I'm not going to eat any bad food, it'd be kind of hard for me to realize, like, it's when you have something specific to subscribe to, I think it makes it a lot easier. So when I, like, decided I wanted to get in better shape, I'm like, I'm going to do the paleo thing. And I stuck with it for about, like, 2 months, and it was great. But over those 2 months, I built up kind of like the mental toughness to steer clear of certain foods and that kind of thing. And then I was able to be like, all right, if I had cheese and milk, because the thing is let's say for a week I've been trying to eat healthy, and then I'm like, I'll add, the occasional cookies and ice cream in here and some sodas, and suddenly you're back to eating crap. So
yeah, I agree. That's good advice too. Yes, once you've kind of got that mental toughness and the knowledge and all that, kind of you can kind of just make your own diet and just eat whatever.
Yeah, just eat healthy.
Exactly. But when you are first starting out, subscribing to a very rigid diet can be very helpful.
Yeah, like the Whole30 thing has been really popular recently, and it catches a lot of flack from people who are like, oh, it's not sustainable.
What's the 30 thing?
The Whole30 is essentially...
Oh, Whole30 is the name of it. Okay,
have you heard of that?
No, I thought you were saying like this Whole30 thing, and I'm like, what's the 30 thing?
Oh, yeah. So the Whole30 is this thing that you do for 30 days, and you basically have, like, I think it's like no processed food. It's pretty similar to paleo, I think, but I think you can have some dairy. But the whole idea is you eat a ton of, like, meat and vegetables and nuts, and just drink water primarily.
Gotcha.
And
I think I did see some people posting about that on Facebook.
Yeah, and it's hard, especially for somebody who's not used to it. And I've talked to people who did it for 30 days, and then now that 30 days is over, they're eating some things that weren't allowed, but they kind of figured out, and they realized how much better they felt while eating healthy.
Totally. And you glean the knowledge of, like, oh, cool, you really get in tune with your body, and you decide what kind of food you're putting in, because food is fuel,
Yeah,
if you're
absolutely.
going to give your body the right fuel, you're going to feel a certain way.
Yeah, and I mean that's where too, with the whole, like, dieting thing too, I think some people can take it overboard. Like, it's okay if if it's somebody's birthday and you go out to dinner and have some ice cream.
Having a cheat day is totally normal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't have to, like, I know some people that it's like it's impossible to go out to eat with them because they're so picky and all that stuff. It's like you can be very healthy and still, like, not be that annoying guy.
Exactly. And Alexander Hamilton, I think, said everything in moderation, including moderation. Like,
yep, exactly.
Sometimes you got to give yourself a break and just do the thing.
Yeah.
Because you just need to.
Exactly. Yep.
That's cool. A second ago, you mentioned that you do BJJ, and I actually was going to transition into that for a second because a little bit ago we were talking about like bodybuilders and how these guys are like 300 pounds, but those people are just not functional human beings.
Yeah, I was just having that conversation. I have a buddy of mine that's been training more like powerlifting type stuff, and we were talking about how there's so many power lifters that, like, can't run a 10-minute mile. And that's kind of my whole goal with, like, I want to be in shape and look good, but I want to have functional fitness, and that's where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is awesome for that. And, like, I'm shooting a sniper competition in January where my buddy and I will spend, like, 3 days carrying all our gear, 40, 50, 60-pound packs, hiking, like, 30-something miles. And that's the kind of thing, like, a professional bodybuilder probably couldn't do that. A professional powerlifter definitely couldn't do that. So my goal is just to, like, be in shape, have functional fitness, that, like, if I need to run, I can run. If I need to lift something, I can lift something. And like we talked about, in moderation. Now, like, nothing against, like, I think it's freaking awesome that there's dudes like, what's his name, Eddie Hall, who deadlifted, like, I think, like, almost 1,100 pounds.
Yeah.
Like, that is incredible. Not taking anything away from that. Like, that is incredible. And these bodybuilders, I mean, it still takes so much hard work, and it's awesome. But that's just not my goal.
Exactly. And I think I've seen it on your Facebook before, like, being hard to kill. Like, being the person that someone who's trying to kill, it's like their worst enemy. You're
Yep.
training BJJ, so you know how to fight hand-to-hand combat. You can take somebody out if you need to. You're extremely well trained in guns and all that kind of stuff. You know, you're really fit. You're strong. Like, you want to be someone that's extremely functional in all facets.
Yeah, exactly. That hard to kill thing came from my buddy Stephen Labar has a company that's called Stay the Course, and so they're kind of like a lifestyle brand. They do t-shirts and all sorts of cool stuff like that. And that was where the hard to kill thing, he actually created a while back this like hard to kill challenge where he had different like fitness trainers that would have something on his website like once a month or once every couple weeks, different workouts. Because I mean, the whole idea of being like hard to kill, I like the idea. It kind of encompasses like everything as just being a functional person.
Mm-hmm. One last thing I wanted to touch on. I think we can kind of wrap this podcast up pretty soon, and we've almost gone for
we've probably gone for a while.
Yeah, it's like an hour and 40. But one thing that I was going to talk about was a lot of times people think that people that are constantly concealed carrying and carrying guns and training for fighting and all this stuff, they're living in fear that someone's going to attack them, fear that someone's going to break into your house, fear that someone, and the reality is 99.999% of the time that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
What's your kind of view on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely not something I do out of fear. It's more, it kind of loops back into like a lot of things in my life, but in Boy Scouts, be prepared, the Scout motto. I like the idea of being prepared for everything, and that could mean having the ability to defend myself is a great skill to have. Having medical training, like I have first aid kits in my motorcycle and in my car with me, all the time. And that's stuff that just like the average person doesn't do. But, I just, that's kind of something I've like lived by, is be prepared for like anything, whether that's like being in good shape or it's knowing how to defend yourself or, knowing how to treat somebody who's been injured, or there's just so many facets of life that Scout motto of be prepared comes into and affects.
Totally true. And if you don't plan, what's the thing? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you've got to have a plan to figure out where you're going and what you want. Mm-hmm. And if you're stuck without a plan, you're just going to get washed around by the tides.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think the main, like, a lot of people ask me like, why do you carry a gun? Is it because you're scared? And I would say no, it's not. It's just because I like to know that I think we have personal responsibility to protect ourselves and also like those around us, those that we love and care about. Because the truth is like when something bad happens, like nobody's coming to save you. Like it's on you. And there's like, we have some excellent law enforcement in our country and that kind of thing, but the truth is like they're not always there to keep you safe. And just like we have incredible EMTs and that kind of thing, like it's great to be able to know how to do CPR on somebody or stuff like that, because you just never know when you could be faced with a bad situation. And so it's like, in my opinion, you might as well have those skills, and you have that personal responsibility to keep yourself safe and take those matters into your own hands. I don't like the idea of having to rely on somebody else to keep me safe or keep me alive.
Yeah, and I think it also, you get a level of confidence when you know that if shit were to hit the fan and whatever, zombie apocalypse, power grid goes out, all that kind of stuff, that there's people like you that are ready and you're prepared for that kind of situation, and that's really awesome. If there was a zombie apocalypse, I'd probably head to your house. You've got the guns and the first aid and all that kind of stuff. And honestly, a lot of people get kind of scared of the idea of guns being around them at all times, and I think people like that would be actually very surprised at how many people on a daily basis they're coming into interactions with that are concealed carrying, and they have no idea. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think that I can't remember the actual stats of like how many people have carry permits in Georgia and that sort of thing, but I totally get guns, how they can be scary, because you see them in use in the movies and these stories in the news, and a lot of people have shot them and they're loud and they recoil and all that kind of stuff. So like I totally get why people can be scared of guns, and that's where it really comes down to just like familiarizing yourself. And once people I can't tell you how many people that have never shot a gun that have told me like guns are so scary. And then I take them and teach them to shoot. And while they don't immediately decide like, I'm going to go buy a gun and carry a gun, they realize like, guns aren't that scary. They're not just going to go off sitting there on the table, and it's like they're not as scary as some things make them out to be.
Definitely. I was going to say something about the concealed carry thing, but I can't remember exactly. Oh yeah, I was going to say, basically, I'm kind of grateful for people like you that are surrounding us on a daily basis, the people that are on a consistent basis always concealed carrying, because those are the type of people where when shit hits the fan, I'm glad to have around, because you're going to do the best of your ability to help people out and protect yourself and protect the other people and kill the bad guy or whatever it ends up being. That's really awesome, man. Well,
thank you.
Any last things that you want to like promote or shout out, or anything you want to say? Any last messages or anything?
No, I mean, that's really it. If people want to follow me on Instagram, they can find me pretty easy. It's at L_Craw. For my name's Luke Crawford, so L_CRAW. And it's I always like connecting with people in general.
Definitely.
So if anybody wants to reach out, has questions about any of the things we talked about, feel free to do it.
Or if you have a wedding, or if you've got any kind of photography needs or whatever. Nice. Well, cool, man. This was really, really fun, and glad we got to do it, man.
Yeah, me too. That was
cool.
Awesome.
All right, everybody. We'll talk to you guys soon. That's it. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. I know I sure did. Make sure you follow Luke. He's always putting out tons and tons of great content. Super talented guy in all kinds of different realms. There's something for everybody to love. I definitely need to have Luke on again soon, because there's still tons of stuff that we didn't get into. But I really want to thank Luke for doing this episode, and make sure that you follow him on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, wherever. I'll have all the links in the show notes. If you want to support the podcast, best way to do that is to go to iTunes, leave me a 5-star review. Also, downloading all the episodes is really, really helpful. I'm trying to get into the new and noteworthy section, so please download all the episodes. That would be super, super helpful. I think it's based on the amount of downloads you get in like 24 hours. So especially if you're a new listener, if you want to go ahead and download all the episodes, even if you're not going to listen to them, that would be super, super helpful. If you want to follow me on my social media platforms, the best way to do that is to go to my website, andrewdeitsch.com. That's Andrew, DEITSCH.com. And you can find links to all my social media handles and accounts. And make sure you follow the podcast Instagram at AD Podcast. I'm putting out tons of content there. Episode 19 is coming up next with celebrity stylist and fashion expert Cameron Heseltine. Cameron has styled tons of celebrities, including John Hamm, Kate Beckinsale, Chrissy Teigen, and Sarah Hyland, just to name a couple. And during our conversation, Cameron talked about why she dropped out of college, some of her crazy stories of styling celebrities in LA, and why it may not be as glamorous as it seems. And we also talked about men's fashion and some do's and don'ts for the guys out there. So that's coming up next. That's all I got time for. I am going to sleep right after I upload this episode. Tomorrow I'm recording 2 new episodes of the podcast, and I have to be up in about 5 hours. Woohoo! All right. Good night, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks again for all the support and love. You guys are the best. And yeah, good night.